This episode is brought to you by Ghost Patch. Ghost Patch is a law enforcement owned and operated company specializing in patches, coins, and flex shields. Quality is top priority with low prices. They always offer free design work and never charge mold or setup fees. Stop letting the big companies rip you off and check out Ghost Patch at ghostpatch.com and ghostpatchcustom.com. Now to the next story.
Everything that we had known about just how these calls, quote unquote, typically go or normally go went right out the window. And then there's this crazy, loud, unbelievably unexplainable sensation that we're going through. And I have no idea what I just did. It's not like in the movies. Everything was super bright and unbelievably noisy and tense, and then we have to start reacting to this moment. We have to handle this situation. We've got people that are screaming at us and all these things, and it's like, oh man, what have I done? That was just the start of, this really, really downward spiral, terrible time in my life, and I didn't expect that. I thought my expertise and dealing with my own self was going to shine, and it was going to be fine, and I was going to bounce back, and just like my namesake Martin Riggs would never have tolerated any kind of weakness on his part or his partner, I'm not going to do that either. And that was my mindset at the time, and it could have been further from the truth. That's when I told myself, well, I'm not gonna fail again to not be able to kill myself. And so I just planned to do what I was gonna do the day at work. And my partner was off. He had taken the day off, or was a day off for him, and that was gonna be the day that that I died.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow. We can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Parts of today's story reminds me of the 1987 movie Lethal Weapon, and the focus on one of the main characters, Martin Riggs, and the struggle with grief as the show begins. Riggs began the film with a death wish. He didn't see any way out of his miserable existence. Not fearing death may not be admirable a quality as we might think. Some might not fear death because they trust that there's something better waiting for them once they die. But that's not exactly how Riggs sees it. He wants to be reunited with his dead wife, but his desire for death is more than anything a release from his pain. He feels tortured every minute he stays alive, and he spends his nights holding a particularly powerful bullet he selected to ensure he dies instantly when he finally pulls the trigger. He's not a loose cannon or a lethal weapon, but a sad man who needs his help. Help is something we all need from time to time. Sometimes we just don't know how to ask for it. The cumulative exposure to trauma in the first responder world is real, and the evidence of alcoholism, divorce rate, anger issues, and sadly suicide is a horrible side effect of this profession. It is often said that the first responder profession is the greatest show on earth. And I would have to agree. The reward is helping others, making a difference in so many lives, is an absolute honor. But this great show can come with a dark and nefarious cost. Today's guest's identity will remain a secret. But the story will pull back the curtain on this darkness and tell a story that will shock but resonate with many, as they too have been dealing with this darkness as well. Thank you. I want to welcome you onto the show, and man, thanks for your courage for coming on here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
For the purpose of the show, we're going to call you Riggs, from Martin Riggs from Lethal Weapon movie, and I think once the listener hears the end of the story, they'll understand why. So we want to start. We always start from the top of your life. We want to get a really good picture of who Riggs is when it comes to your story. Talk about early life growing up.
Well, it was pretty carved out of soap. I grew up in Arlington, just down the road, and everything that I did, all the schools that I went to were off of one, main street in Arlington, right there by UTA. Didn't really do a whole lot of anything other than just try to, get through K through 12 as quickly as possible. I did band in high school, but I did have a realization after that when I was growing up, I didn't know that I had been dealing with a mother who was clinically depressed the whole time before anybody knew that she should take medication for that. And so I had to deal with a lot of just kind of mild psychological abuse that I thought was just parenting, that was just the way she was. And I didn't realize that for a long time until after I graduated and moved out and joined the Navy, that was something that I had to struggle with to get my point across to her. I had been diagnosed at a young age with ADD. And so, of course, in the middle 80s, all we had was Ritalin. And so I was put on that very quickly to help me, study and stay ahead of everything because I was slipping in school. Just with the stress of the way my mom was dealing with divorce and my dad had left, and her mental health concerns. She went from being an at-home mom. My dad worked. Now she's got to go back into the workforce, and that was a very big struggle for her. And there were just things that she was angry at me and my sister about, a lot of the time, and we didn't realize then. Like I said, it was just something that was just how she was. We just thought it was parenting. But we got to a point where it's like, I'm glad I'm getting out of the house, because I think as an 18-year-old, I had no plan to go to college. I wasn't in a spot where I was thinking I was smart enough or good enough to be able to work my way through, 4 or 5 years at UTA. So I had to get out and give myself a break from the tension and the anxiety that her depression had kind of caused on me and my sister. And then I dealt with a lot of guilt leaving my sister at home with my mom. She was 6 years younger than I was. So I left for the Navy, and then my sister was 12, trying to, thrive in that environment. And my mom's a different person. She's a loving grandmother and awesome now, but there was a lot of years where it was very tough to be at home with her because of the things that she was going through on a personal level and with her mental health concern. But of course, no one spoke of that back then. I mean, that was just something that, at-home moms did. They didn't ask questions or go to the doctor or make a big scene. She just wanted to get through the day, and that took a lot of time, took a lot of toll on her family, specifically me and my sister.
What about your father?
I'm still blessed to have my dad. He's still alive. He lives in Abilene. He and my mom were a very good team. They were not really in love. Maybe at one time they were. They married in 1963. So it was a lot of years where they were just young people. They both worked, which was, my mom and he worked at General Dynamics. I guess what used to be Lockheed, turned into Lockheed. So they made pretty good money for a young couple, in the late 60s, they were doing pretty well. My dad missed Vietnam because he had gotten out of the Army right before that kicked off. And then they just kind of grew apart. It was like they spent, so much time just being kind of like together. They were in love maybe at one time, and then over time they just kind of became comfortable being at home. And then I came along, and then they really were able to focus on me. My dad's a real sweet man. He's not necessarily a helpful dad. He just kind of is just a guy that I looked up to, but I didn't know any better. He just worked and came home and was very like standoffish. My mom and him didn't really socialize or go anywhere or do anything. So
he wasn't the strong figure in the family.
No.
Your mother was.
Mom was.
Obviously a very strong character, personality in the family.
Yeah, my dad is, he was, I guess, more intellectual. He taught at LD Bell High School. He taught history and English, and then went to work at Bell Helicopter when my mom found out she was going to have me. But yeah, he would come home, and a lot of the times he would just kind of sit in the living room. He was, very literate, liked to read a lot, and just kind of had quiet time. And, so we stayed in the other room and let him be by himself, and we watched TV, hung out with my mom or whatever. So we didn't really do anything. He coached Little League and stuff like that, and helped out with soccer and all that stuff you do when you're a young person, but nothing really out of the way. And then he and my mom divorced when I was like 12 or 13, and then he remarried right after they just split up. So it was a very quick transition from, all of a sudden now he's got a new wife, and I've got 5 stepbrothers all of a sudden, and they're living in a different house, and they're doing well. My dad's wife's she was a legal assistant, and my dad worked at Bell, so they had plenty of money, and my mom struggled, and that was tough to watch. So anyway.
Your mother had to, that was trauma. Divorce is trauma in itself, not just for the spouse. And I really understand what you're describing is like basically 2 roommates that are raising kids.
Yes, they were a good team. Yeah,
and once they split, your mother kind of, went through that. It's trauma, and she's going through that, and she became depressed and anxious, and that affected how you and your sister were raised.
And I think that she had, clinical depression for a long time, and probably a lot of that was probably a divider between her and my father. They would, like I said, they never would have spoken about it because you didn't really bring that up back then. It was just something you didn't talk about. But I think that her depression, and then my dad is also has ADHD. He found that out much later in life. Probably he was in his 50s before he realized that he had attention deficit as a grown person. So their parenting styles were very, he wanted no conflict, and she needed some kind of emotion. So
stimulus.
Right.
Needed this confrontation for stimulus.
Yeah, she would drive an argument just to get a reaction from the guy, and it was like, it's just tough to watch that, going on. So when he would sit by himself in another room and read, it was a way of, just kind of distancing, and he didn't have to worry about
disconnected.
Yeah, didn't have to get too involved. And and unfortunately, it's like you see a lot of those things as a young person, and then you manifest that as an adult. It's like I have struggled with, disassociation and ADHD, the things that affect me personally in my relationship with my wife and my kids. It's like, my wife and I, she's very high strung, very outspoken. Her background, she's just a very independent, strong person. And like my dad, I rather just brush it under the rug and avoid conflict and try to keep everything, on the even keel and keep it happy. And man, it makes her crazy because I just avoid conflict, and that makes her nuts. So
it's a learned behavior, and that's what you learn during your peak years of adolescence, and that's what you know.
Yep.
And a lot of people never figure it out because that even goes the other way with abusive and angry men or women. They grow up that way, and that's how they become as adults themselves. But you probably would have to be more intentional about how you act now, because that's in your makeup as far as you growing up in that Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, my wife and I talk about this, and this is something that's come out, even fast forwarding to I talked to a therapist, and I discussed the relationship with my wife, and I tell my counselor the same thing, and she's like, those are things that you have to focus on. Just like you said, it's like I can't ignore my relationship with my wife and my kids the way my dad and my mom just put everything away just to try to do the best they could to raise my sister and I. And it's like they thought they did a great job, and they did a good job. We're both, successful people, but I want to not be the role model that I saw. I want my wife to know that I love her and I care about her, and I'm here to assist her and be her partner and her helper through life, and that my kids can see a connected dad who's, in touch with their mom, and, we're on the same page, united front, and all that good stuff. So, but it's very easy just because my confrontation style is very not like that. So I do have to think, it's like, how can I be a really nice arguer? Because I'm a pretty nice guy. I try to not make conflict. If she wants it, then I have to find a way to do it so she feels like I'm not ignoring her.
It's work.
Yeah.
Because it was something that you weren't taught. You were taught the opposite growing up, and it kind of just became ingrained in who you are, and it's part of your mental DNA.
Yep.
It's just that's there's a lot of people, even like alcoholism and then anger issues, disconnecting from the family. I mean, and I see that a lot in this profession, especially. And speaking of this profession, before you got here, you made a stop through the Navy. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I had to, like I said, I had to get out of the house. I was not prepared to go to college, so I figured if I was going to go to school, my mom certainly couldn't afford to help me out with that. So, and then my dad wasn't in that position either. His stepsons were all pretty dialed in on college, and they were already, going off to Abilene Christian or wherever they were headed for school, and it was tough to kind of not be the guy without the scholarship. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to get out. And I left in October of '92 and joined the Navy, and that was a great time. The things that were a struggle for me was that at the time, you weren't allowed to be on a prescription like Ritalin and be enlisted in the military. So I had to get a waiver for the fact that I had taken mental health care medication that was, at the time was a study aid. They didn't have an idea that it was supposed to help us, function as, the way like neurotypical people do. So I had to immediately just kind of detox from being on Ritalin every day for the last 5 years of my life to all of a sudden now I can't take it at all. And that was not easy. And, I'm in recruit training. I've never been away from my family for any amount of time, and now all of a sudden I'm on my own trying to make my way now, and that was a pretty big struggle, but it ended up working out. I mean, it was a really good time. I had a lot of excitement, a lot of good friends that I made, so it was the best choice for me to help me kind of grow up and I guess separate myself a little bit from the stress and everything of being at home. I was able to focus on my job and no distractions, so that really, for my mindset, I was able to really dial in and thrive in that environment. But when I decided to get out, I was ready to come home. So,
did you have to go back to the Ritalin, or were you able to stay off of it after going through the Navy?
I stayed off of it. I should have gotten back on it, but no, I didn't. I didn't at the time. I got out of the military and I went to work in the private sector. But as far as talking to psychologists and anybody that would be of someone who could help me with that sort of a diagnosis and kind of get me back on track, it was too expensive. I could never afford it. So I just kind of, just brushed it under the rug we talked about earlier and just kind of tried to fight through it. But I was single and didn't have any relationships at the time. So it was easy. I was able to focus on work, and that's what kind of kept me going. And no one really noticed that, I probably should have been medicated at that time too. But because it was just me, it was, not really a big concern.
Nobody had a front row seat really to the
right
real you, as far as you showed them what everybody shows people what they want them to see. But in a relationship, that's really hard because people are around you so much.
Yeah, the facade's easier to crack when you've got people in your life 24/7 and when they're just, coming in and out, or, short-term relationships with other people, and it never came up. And as soon as something got to be contentious in that relationship, it was easy just to break it off, and I could go back to doing what I was doing, which was nothing, just kind of hanging out and doing my own thing and waiting for the next thing to pop up. So
you talked. I want to ask you this before I lose it. You growing up with a father figure that did kind of stay aloof and was disconnected and like to stay in the other room, and you had your mother and she was going through her depression after the split. How were you as like socially as far as making friends and establishing friendships? And then when you got into the Navy, you mentioned you had a lot of friends. Was that something you had to more learn once you got out of the house, or did you already start developing that before you got to the Navy?
Yeah, no, I had a pretty solid friendship group when I was going through school. By the time I got to be in high school, I'd been in band since 7th grade, and I went to Arlington High.
I have to ask real quick, what did you play?
The tuba and the drums.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'd been in band long enough, and that at the time Arlington only had 4 high schools, so the feeder schools were mostly the kids that I knew went to Arlington High from the junior high that I went to. We had a few that came from Gunn Junior High, and so with that I met basically the same kids I've been friends with since 7th grade. We're all doing band, so over that course of 3 or 4 years before we got to be sophomores, I'd made a pretty good core of friends at my junior high level. And then when we got to high school, it was easy just to, pick up with a kind of a newer group. And I was able to focus on, since I was good at band and I enjoyed it, it was easy for me to make friends in that environment. We all had something in common. But going out and meeting someone outside of a small, pretty specific circle has been very tough for me my whole life. I mean, it's never been something I've ever been very good at. Just by way of comparison, if I know you for a long time, it's easy to continue to be your friend, but I wouldn't go meet anyone new unless I had an explicit introduction or
probably to gain trust. I
yeah.
mean, just
Yeah, I just didn't ever think I was very good at it. And and of course, being adolescent, you have insecurities about every little thing, so that doesn't make it any easier. The Navy, we were all a bunch of misfits just running around trying to, get down the road. So it was simple to kind of bond with the isolation of being where we were at and the job that we had and all that. So we were all in it together, I guess, and it made it easy.
At what point did you want to get into law enforcement?
So I made a run through the private sector after I got out of the Navy, and I was working in information technology for a Fort Worth rich guy that worked over in downtown, and he was in oil and gas, and so I did information technology stuff for him, managed email, and when the IT market went up in smoke after September 11th, I got laid off with a bunch of other people that I worked with, and so I actually re-enlisted and went into the Air Force instead of going back in the Navy, and I had been a firefighter and a pipe fitter in the Navy, so I wanted to try something else, so I became a paramedic. And the Army has paramedics for their infantry guys, and so that's what the Air Force, it was kind of a job that no one really needed, but they had me doing it anyway, so I wasn't working, and so they said, hey, if you want to volunteer with the base military police squadron, we can give you a full-time gig. You can get back into active duty and have all your benefits and everything reinstated. So I was like, sure, I can stand at a gate and wave people through the gate guard thing, and so I was doing that. And then I met an officer that I work with. He was in my unit in Abilene, and he was leaving to come to Dallas, and I followed him, and so here I am.
What year was that?
I met him in 2005, and then he got out a little bit before I did, and then I signed up and joined the department in 2008.
You and I talked offline about your background as far as you didn't have too many traumatic events. You didn't deploy. You weren't in infantry in the military, but what I think we just heard is that you had an interesting home environment that also is it kind of shaped you and led you down the road too of who you are as an individual and an experience with dealing with depression. And anything could be infectious, whether it's being around an anxious person, being around an angry person, being around a negative person, being around a depressed person. You kind of learn that, and it also rubs off. And then you get into the police world, there's a lot of cynicism and there's a lot of negativity, and really you see not just the quote-unquote critical incidents, but it's the dealing with people. You're dealing with grief. You're dealing with other people's lives, and you're seeing their violence. You're seeing their grief. You're seeing their sadness and just despair. How did you, when you got immersed into the police world, how did you adapt to that?
Well, I was so excited when I got the job. I grew up, in the 80s, in the heyday of watching cop shows on TV and watching cop movies and everything. And so when I decided to join the department, I couldn't wait to get to work because I had already felt like I had experience doing law enforcement when I was in the Air Force. And it was much different. I mean, obviously it's a pretty, safe little environment on base, but, just that feeling of kind of being someone that even people on base looked up to be, it's like you go over to Afghanistan or Iraq, you've got, people that are doing base security at a very high level because you've got a ton of assets that need to be protected from whatever threats are out there. But then back home, it's like these people who are deployed, they're counting on you to look after their families and just, want someone trying to pull off some craziness at the base and get someone hurt back home. They don't have to be worried about that while they're in Iraq or Afghanistan. So it felt like a very important job. So when I got hired, I knew that there was a ton of people who had probably applied for the same spot that I was given the opportunity to fill. Like I had done something, I was showing that I was, someone thought I was good enough to do the job with the city of Dallas. And I figured, a big city, it's like, you got to be doing something right, because, they got 1 million people apply for the job. And in fact, they even had they had that hiring bonus program was in effect when I took the job as well. So it's like, you've got a lot of people trying to get on with the department. And here I am sitting in an academy seat. I can't wait to start. This is going to be awesome.
Did you do one of those weekend tryouts where it's like 200 or 300 at once over the weekend?
Absolutely. Yeah. Show up Friday and, do all
knock
the PT,
it all out. Yep.
Hope for the best. And then it was a madhouse. The conference room was just packed full of people. And a bunch of, Army Special Forces guys and stuff. Everybody's standing around just looking ripped. And I'm standing there like, I'm never going to get this job. There's no way. But, I felt really honored to have gotten it. It just as much, I felt very honored to be in the military too. Not everybody can join the service. It's something that you have to at least have the qualifications for. And I couldn't wait to get to work. It was time to do it. And like I didn't have the experience, but I knew that I'd watched a ton of cop shows, and it's got to be pretty much like that,
Just like Murtaugh and Riggs.
That's it.
Yeah.
My heroes, they had to do it all figured out. They had it all figured out.
I want to get into your shooting, but I want you to kind of describe it from an emotional lens as far as going through it, not necessarily all the details of it, but it's just the aftermath. Your episode is off a writing that we received almost a year and a half ago, and it's a very detailed, basically testimonial of a time in your life and in your journey that you had to go through, and it was a rocky time.
Yeah,
but it started kicking off after an OIS.
Yes, basically. That day was like any other day. There was nothing off the wall about it. The only thing I remember being different, what I don't normally do, and I don't know why this came up after so many years, But I remember that morning I was at the station, and for some reason I had my pistol, and I was thinking to myself, I need to make sure this thing's oiled. And so, I went and oiled up my gun. Like, I probably only do that maybe twice a year, like when we qualify, right? It's pretty pathetic, But I remember taking the thing apart and oiling it and just thinking, you never know, just make sure you're on track. That day, I mean, like, what are the odds, And so, my partner and I, we cleared that morning and headed out. Of course, it's a Saturday, and, it was busy during the middle of the day, and we're running around summertime. It's cops, we're answering calls all day here and there. And, my idea was with my partner, we were going to go try to get a bite to eat, try to, just grab some food in between all these calls. And, the call that we ended up getting assigned to had been holding for a while, and at the channel I was working at, they had a rookie and his trainer, and we thought they were going to grab the call just because it had been a good training call for this young officer. And I guess they were tied up on something else. And anyway, it just sat there, and there's no way we're going to ever grab a 50 on a Saturday, in the summertime. It's just not going to happen. And so we were like, you know what? That's okay. We've got a plan. My partner and I did a lot of calls involving, mental health, the 46 type calls that we got. We had gone to the school, and, we're very good, a working partnership. We had a good thing figured out. So we decided that we would go ahead and just take it, and we'd find a way to eat after we took the patient to the hospital, get him checked into Green Oaks. And there was tons of places to eat lunch up there. We could just eat and come back down to the channel, and no one would be the wiser, because we already knew that's what you do. You go eat after you go to the hospital. And so that was our mindset. It's like, this is what we're going to do. We're not thinking law enforcement related. We're thinking, let's help this guy out real quick, and then we'll go benefit from it and get to go get a burrito or something. And that was kind of our focus. And, after that, it obviously went completely sideways, and nothing that we had planned to do ever came to fruition. It just went bad as quick as it could.
To summarize that shooting, though, it was a 46 or a mentally disturbed person,
mm-hmm.
and you end up being involved in shooting him. Did the person die?
Yeah.
Okay. We're just trying to avoid talking too much about the details, but I guess if there's anything you want to say about that moment in the shooting and directly following, just going through that experience.
Well, it's like, I guess you think about that. Cops dream about it sometimes. There's like documented, like, people will tell this story that they have these dreams about having officer-involved shootings during their dreams. And it's like, how am I going to respond to that in that situation? And in the dream, there's always some malfunction normally that goes on with your gun or with something. There's always something terrible that makes it horrible, and it seems like that's always really bad. Like the trigger pull is always 1,000,000 pounds, or the gun just breaks, or something ridiculous. And so in this moment, all I was thinking about was, my plan is out the window. Like, this whole event took place in about 6 seconds. And in that moment, we started doing like cop stuff, just try to make contact with these people. And then it just didn't feel right. And then it just got worse and worse in this super short, compressed time frame. Everything that we had known about just how these calls, quote unquote, typically go or normally go, went right out the window. And then there's this like really crazy, loud, unbelievably unexplainable sensation that we're going through, and I have no idea what I just did, other than I think I might have shot the concrete of this driveway I'm standing in, because I didn't ever see a gun. It's not like in the movies. Everything was super bright and unbelievably noisy and tense, and then we have to start reacting to this moment where now all of a sudden we're not just able to say something candid and leave and go get in our car and drive off to the next call. We have to handle this situation. We've got people that are screaming at us and all these things. And it's like, oh man, what have I done? And it's like, you don't think about, I'm trying to defend myself, which is what it ended up coming down to. You think, what the hell am I going to do? What are we doing? This is out of control. We got to get some more cops over here, man. Somebody needs to call the police, because this is terrible. We're going nuts over here. And, my partner's doing his thing, and we're trying to get the fire department there. And, all of a sudden it rains cops. There's a million people everywhere standing around doing, that's just the best part about this, a huge department is there's tons of officers there to help you out. But man, it's so fast paced. And then they start talking to us about, you got to call an attorney, and there's going to be homicide investigators. And I'm like, well, okay, so I've seen a ton of cop movies. This never happens. Where did this come into it? There's never been a problem, and now I have to start thinking about those things. And then they're saying like, well, you need to call your family and tell them what's going on. And I'm like, what do I tell my wife? The only thing I knew was from reading a book about a Texas Ranger, and it was a true story. And he said, if you ever find yourself in a shooting, find yourself someplace quiet, call your wife and tell her you love her and that you'll be home in a little while. I mean, that's all you can do, And so I called my wife. I said, don't turn the TV on. This is bad. Went crazy. And I love you and I'll see you soon, And she's like, of course, that made everything worse for her. She had no idea what was going on. I'm like, I'm okay. It's fine. But we're in a big deal right now. And that was just the start of, this really, really downward spiral, terrible time in my life. And I didn't expect that. I thought my, expertise and dealing with my own self was going to shine, and it was going to be fine, and I was going to bounce back. And just like, my namesake, Martin Riggs, would never have tolerated any kind of weakness on his part or his partner. I'm not going to do that either. And that was my mindset at the time, and it could have been further from the truth.
You mentioned the Texas Ranger book. Those books like that really don't go into the sinister road that you had to go through. And most movies do not either, cop movies.
Yeah, no.
And even like Lethal Weapon, it was the grief of his wife that basically made him, he wanted to die. Mm-hmm. He thought about doing it himself. He wanted to die to take the pain away.
Yeah.
You described this as the day you died.
Yeah.
Can you describe that more to us?
So, we mentioned earlier that there's the cop dream where you have the malfunctioning gun. And just for backstory, my version of that dream was, when I would have a bad guy that was trying to get to me and my partner in my dream, and I'd pull my gun and get the good sight picture, and then when I pull the trigger, because this guy's going to try to hurt me or kill me, and the bullets would just roll out of the barrel. Like they wouldn't even, like an old musket, like not even like a regular projectile bullet like now. It's just like a little ball like you would see in an old Civil War movie or something.
Out.
Yeah, and it would just roll out of the barrel and fall on the ground. And I'm in the dream, I'm trying to pick up the casing that's already spent. There's no gunpowder in it. Of course, in the dream, it makes perfect sense. And I'm trying to put the bullet back together before this entity gets to me and kills me. And I'm trying to put it back into my gun, and it never worked. I never did it in time. That's what always would wake me up, was that I never got the gun to work again. And then, after this in shooting that we got involved in, I never had that dream ever again. And I thought, that's a positive thing. Like, that's great. And I had heard that was sometimes the case. Officers don't have this bad dream anymore, and because they functioned when they needed to. And that's been the problem with the dream, is you're always wondering about whether or not you're going to be able to protect yourself or your partner or another person, whoever, in that moment. And if you're able to do that, and you do what you need to do not to get hurt, then that's great. You've proved yourself worthy in some weird, scale of worthiness, I guess, of, well, I was able to
You
successfully
rose to the occasion.
Yeah, right. And I had this that dream that got replaced with a worse dream, and I didn't expect that at all. And so when I start having this other dream that came out of nowhere, I was thinking, I'm on my way back. I'm doing good. I was able to rise to the occasion, but now there's something that's
More sinister?
yeah. I mean, like, if you can imagine something worse than, having to shoot someone so they don't stab you or hurt you, it's worse than that. Like, that's like the worst thing I could think of. And now I have this dream where I'm in a situation that's even more perilous than what I was at when I was in our shooting. And it was so traumatizing that I would not want to go to sleep because it was happening all the time. I mean, I was suffering from this, multiple nights during the week, and it just would make me not want to sleep. And I think fearing that and being so obsessed with not having this dream was just making it worse. Like, it would just continue to go worse and worse and faster and more and more.
Tell us the dream.
So I would be where I could see. Everything was bright and light filled. Nothing really descriptive in like a room. It was just kind of like being outside, but not having anything. You couldn't see trees or sky. It was just a bright area. And then I would notice this kind of inky blackness that would be in front of me, like a liquid, just like floating in front of me, getting closer and closer. And as it got closer, I felt like I would accelerate toward it. And it was uncontrollable, like I was being pulled straight directly forward, like I was standing, and then I'm just like being pulled toward a wall. And then it would the whole thing would rotate, and I was then falling into like this pit that had no definite sides or depth or anything. It was just everywhere I looked was just blackness. And I was just falling faster and faster and faster and faster. And then I would notice that there was like an end point, maybe like a door. And the door had better open before I get to it, or this is going to be a massive crash, because I'm going so fast and I'm trying to grab at anything, but it's like, putting your hands through like warm butter. My hands would just slide through this material that was around me. And then I would bottom out, and then I would wake up. There's some evil that was pulling me, and I would be aware of that as I got to the end of this tunnel, or whatever you want to call it. And then right before this evilness would consume me, I would wake up. But it would be so traumatic for me that I wouldn't be able to sleep. And I was done sleeping after that. And that's, I think, the tough part, which is why I didn't want to go to sleep, because I knew I was going to be up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, without being able to go back to bed and be able to sleep again, because I was going to have the same dream and I didn't want to have to deal with it.
It always come about the same time in the night?
Yeah. I mean, between, I guess, maybe, whatever time, going to bed 10 or 11 at night. So by 1 or 2, 3 o'clock at the latest, I'd be awake. And, I guess that would be about the time you'd kind of be exhausted from the day, and then you would just fall asleep almost immediately, and then have this weird REM sleep thing that would spin up this terribleness that I had to deal with every day.
And that dark ether matter was just waiting on you to get to that point of your sleep.
Every night. 4 or 5 times a week.
Did you ever make it to the door? You never made it out?
No, it was always, the door was kind of replaced with like the evilness, like it was like the door was like
trapping you.
Yeah, it was like a manifest, but it was like if I could get through it, then it would be maybe back to lightness again. But the evilness in the dream would grab me and pull me before I ever got to it would interrupt that path, and
it wouldn't let you out.
No.
What did you think that was?
I didn't have an answer for that, because at the time, I was just trying to kind of do my thing. Like, I didn't want anyone to know that I was feeling upset about anything. I didn't really even realize at the time that I was that upset. I just knew there was this nightmare that I had all the time, and I couldn't explain that, and I didn't ask anyone, and I certainly wasn't going to make a big deal out of it because I was afraid that the department was going to put me on light duty, or, you know, worse, take my gun away and my badge and say, you got to work in some unit that we can keep you safe and out of trouble, which means you're broken and you can't do what you're supposed to do. And that was not going to be something I could tolerate, I didn't think.
Legal services. They were going to put you there.
They might have put me in legal services, yeah. Possibly in the auto pound, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Just flip a coin, you're going to one of those.
Yeah.
So did you tell your wife about this?
Well, she knew that I was having nightmares.
You were waking up,
Yeah,
and
I
you would just get out of bed because you knew you did not want to go back to sleep to revisit this?
Yeah, I tried not to bother her, and I knew I was bothering her because she would wake up and, you know, she'd be trying to be considerate, and, you know, you're having a dream again. Yeah, I'm gonna get up. Okay, and I didn't make a big deal out of it because I knew she has to work and she's got my kids to take care of and all kinds of stuff too. So I didn't want to burden her with that, and that's what I felt like I was turning into, was kind of this, you know, burden, and that was beginning to wear on me a lot because she was trying to be supportive, but then again, I didn't want to let her into a side of me that was not doing as well as I guess I thought I should be at the time, and so I didn't want her to worry. You know, at the time, her and I weren't in the greatest place, you know, marriage-wise anyway. Like, our relationship was not necessarily, you know, shaky, but it was, you know, like, people have trouble in their relationships. And so that's a time where, because of the job and because of things that we did, you know, we didn't see a lot of each other, and it was just hard to, you know, have that time to continue to build your relationship. And that was just another roadblock to us being on a great path. And so I didn't want to make that something that she was aware of as much.
You didn't want to be another thing to be on her mind.
Yeah.
As far as the department goes, there are protocols that we have to go through after a shooting or, you know, a critical incident like this. You go see the city psych doc, and there is a process.
Yeah.
But, you know, people get good at becoming poker players.
Absolutely.
And going in and talking to these, and they're asking you, how are you doing? Your response would be,
you're doing fine. I'm good. Everything's fine. And it's a dumpster fire and it's terrible. But if you give them the wrong answer, you know that they're going to put you somewhere where you're not going to get to do your job anymore, and you're not going to be the police anymore. And that kind of weakness and that kind of brokenness was not something that I was going to be able to believe that I was at that level. So when they ask you, and to their credit, I mean, all those guys, the department was great. All the psychiatric folks that, you know, at the psych docs that we went and talked to, that the city, you know, mandated, they never questioned it. They were completely cool with the whole, everything's fine. And, you know, are you having any kind of thoughts of, you know, hurting yourself? Do you have nightmares? Nope, not any of that. I'm good. And I would even add the fake laugh and the surprised look on my face to kind of cement that I'm in control of this, man. I got nothing but, you know, thumbs up. I'm good to go. Everything's fine. I'm doing well. And, you know, can I please go back to doing what I know and what I'm good at, which is driving around a cop car and doing my thing. And like I said, to their credit, okay, all right, if you think you're good, then hey, you're good, man. You're fine. We love that. Let's get back and answer some calls. And I think I took 2 or 3 days off, and I was right back to shagging calls again. And I was not in a position to, you know, that I should have probably done that. It was in pretty bad shape.
Well, I'd imagine the city psych docs are probably used to that response more times than not when they go, because of this, everything you just described as far as fear of losing what you have and being put in a place. And also there's a stigma put on mental health in general, and then also especially when you factor in the law enforcement profession or first responder profession, there has always been a stigma of appearing, you don't want to look weak.
Right. That was,
because Martin Riggs is not.
No.
He's not weak.
He would not tolerate that level of weakness. No, there's no way. I mean, a steely resolve and a sarcastic attitude about the whole thing is all you're going to get from that guy. And that's all I was going to, give anybody either, because that's who you want people to think that you are. He's the hero, and he always manages to pull something out of his butt, and it works. And that's what I want. I'm not going to have somebody tell me I've been in the military. I've been, I'm a cop now. I've got daughters and a wife, so I'm pretty brave. That's tough to raise, So I'm doing my thing. I'm not broken. I'm not a coward. I'm not, sick or anything like that. I got a job to do. So can I please get back to doing that? Just leave me alone. You guys are really starting to kind of crimp my style. I got to get out of this office so I can go back out to the road. And that was not, I shouldn't have been doing that. It was terrible.
Because you already just proved to yourself that you could rise to the occasion. You could perform.
Mm-hmm.
The bullet didn't just dribble out of the barrel.
Nope.
But then it was replaced by something way worse and nefarious.
Yeah.
And you went back to work, and I was reading here that basically within 3 days these nightmares started.
Yep.
And 3 to 4 times, 5 times a week, these were the same or similar dream was going on.
Yes.
Lack of sleep can have so many effects on the human body and mind. I mean, we've gone over that, and
that's just what I was going to get to is, well, the dreams are one thing now, but lack of sleep will spur on a whole lot of other things. So what else started degrading?
Well, so, being awake at home at night, I don't want to turn on the TV. I don't want to do anything that's going to disturb my wife, disturb my girls. We have a small house, so there's not like a lot of room. I don't have like a cool man cave where I can go and like play Xbox or Madden or whatever and like leave everything alone. And I thought, I can't be up all night. I've got to be at work. What can I do to facilitate going back to sleep so that I can get some rest? And absolutely, it's like just start drinking. That's a good way to go back to sleep. I'll take a couple of shots or something, and that'll put me back to sleep, and it'll be fine. And before long, it's like all I've got in my life is the job, and trying to hide from what I know is not right, but I'm not going to admit it. So I'm going to cover that up with alcohol. And I've got so many things at that time telling me this is a terrible idea. I've got both my maternal and paternal grandfathers were alcoholic. My mom's sister was an alcoholic. These are people that were consumed by alcohol. It killed them. I mean, it took their life at a very young age. I had friends that, were killed in drunk driving accidents. I mean, I knew that nothing was going to be made better by adding alcohol to this situation, but I didn't know of any other way to cope. I mean, it's like when you're that terrified of simple things like going to sleep, you're going to add anything you can to make it work. And it's like, it made me feel better because now all of a sudden, hey, good time Charlie, I'm not this morose, sad, beat down, depressed guy. I'm the lighthearted kind of, hey, dad's coming around and everything's starting to look up guy. And that helped because it was going south and I was out of control. And so I started drinking, and by drinking, I don't really drink. So this is not like something where I've always just kind of been someone who drank and now I'm just adding to that. It's like
it started all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's really all of a sudden. I mean, I drank some in the Navy because that's what we did. I mean, 21-year-old dudes around, nothing to do. But I really didn't drink a whole lot, and my wife doesn't really drink. And so now when I say this, I'm talking about just basically it was the hiding of the drinking from my family. I had booze hidden all over my house. I mean, that was like, okay, I don't want to get caught drinking, because my wife and I had talked about that too. We're like, look, we're not doing well as a couple. We're struggling in our marriage. We don't need that one more thing. And we thought that something like one of us being an alcohol addict or a drug addict or whatever was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, in addition to having to worry about, mental health concerns. And our marriage was, like I said, not in a good spot. So anything could have been that, that final straw. And so I've got to find a way to keep it together at home, but try to find something that's going to help me cope. But I can't let my family know about the coping mechanism. And I also can't let them know that I'm struggling. So I tied up all these things, and I'm like, well, now you got to hide it, and that was the part that made me feel so guilty, was that I knew in my heart of hearts that it was wrong to be doing that. I knew it was unsafe. I knew it was not really me, but I did it anyway. It was like I was powerless to stop that. And I've been able to, stop things that I don't want to do, kind of like cold turkey or whatever. But this was something that I was having a real hard time with. And so, like I said, I was hiding alcohol all over the house. I mean, I hid booze in the water tank part of the commode. I mean, that's pathetic, I mean, it's funny.
I've seen it in movies, actually.
That's
I've
what
heard
I'm
about it.
saying. I mean, I learned to do that from watching a movie.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's a great idea.
Hiding bottles and rolled up towels in a closet.
Yeah.
Just wherever you could.
Stick them in in the dirty clothes hamper in my closet. The garage was easy because I had tons of space out there. I mean, it was ridiculous. And we're not talking about high quality booze. It was terrible. I mean, this was like the cheapest crap I'd get my hands on. And then I would just mix it with Powerade. And my wife couldn't tell because it was vodka. And she never noticed. She would notice, but I would just gaslight her and say, "Oh no, that's crazy. I've got my Gatorade here. I'm just hydrating. I'm doing my thing. Just, what are you talking about?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know. You just kind of seem like you're off." No, I'm good. I'm just, going through stuff, or I'm tired, or whatever. Anything you can say to hide that. And then you realize you're just hiding everything. It's just one game of the shell game that your life is. Come home, sneak around my house, pretend like I'm like a ghost that just drifts in and out of this residence with my wife, who's this, beautiful person who I love. I don't even talk to her. I don't talk to my kids. All I'm trying to do is keep it together at work and hide this like lightweight, I'm a lightweight. I'm not going to lie to y'all, but it's like this binging that I was just trying to do something to feel better. Because all I knew was just like pain for this whole time. I was trying to work through this despair that had kind of taken over my whole thing. And I wasn't used to that because I felt like, I felt like I was a pretty good, easygoing guy. I'm good, but this is something I'm not familiar with. I'm not comfortable with it. So I'm adding the one thing that's making everything worse. And then I knew that was terrible. And then, so I decided to quit. I didn't want to get fired. I knew that if I showed up to work loaded, I mean, I had the math down. I mean, I had the time, it's like, okay, if you got to be at work at 7:30. So you got to be 1 hour, 2 hour, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Got to get to sleep at a certain time. I can't drink past 10 at night. So I got to cram all this booze into 3 or 4 hours without letting her know I'm intoxicated, and then try to sleep it off and be ready to go. I mean, it was driving me insane. And, but so I realized, I'm like, this is going to go bad. I don't think I can stand getting fired. So I've got to be good to go at work. That's all my energy. Everything that I was trying to do was just to keep the job where I could do it. I didn't care about home. I didn't care about my kids. I didn't talk to my wife. I mean, it was come in, check in with them, veg out on the couch, and hide from them so that I could be ready to go and be dialed in at the office. And that was the bottom line. And it was driving me crazy because I had no other outlets. Couldn't talk to my wife, couldn't talk to my friends. I had my partner, and I was hiding from him. I mean, everything. It was maddening.
So as hard as you tried to avoid the darkness, it consumed you. I mean, it took over, and the only thing that you thought was actually helping you through this was making it worse, and you were feeding into the darkness.
Absolutely. I mean, it was just I was just one step at a time, getting further and further into this world where I knew I was going to lose control. And because we had been in this critical incident, thank God the department, when I was completely unraveling, I told the chain of command at my station, hey, I need to take some time off to deal with this. And again, hey, take all the time you want, man. Whatever you got to do. Which was great because then I didn't have to worry about coming to work. I could do whatever I wanted. And that's when I was beginning to think that, I'm going to lose everything. If I stay on this path, my wife, who's been hanging in there and trying to keep her head above water and keep our family together, you know, I'm turning into a problem for my family. And they're developing a me problem like really fast. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. I feel like I am completely out of control, and I cannot make contact with her. I can't contact with my kids, nothing. I'm just a robot that is just doing the job and coming home. And I'm like, I've got to do something. I've got to fix some part of it. So I slammed the door on drinking. I just cold turkey, I'm going to not drink anymore. And I did not realize at the time that was like probably the worst thing I could have done, given that I wasn't really a big drinker. And now I've been basically binging for 10 months while just trying not to completely lose it. And then I just completely took that away. And I fell into the worst friggin' pit of despair, of depression that I could ever imagine. I mean, it was like, okay, I can't, you hear the term, like, I couldn't face the world. I couldn't get out of bed. I was like, I couldn't hardly move. You know, I would wake up and just stare at the ceiling of my bedroom. Like, there's no way I can go to work today. And like I said, thank God the department was cool enough to be like, yeah, take all the time you want. Cause I could not function. And that's when I had told myself, you are losing it, dude. You're not able to keep this together. And it's driving me crazy because I'm terrible for everybody, period. I mean, I had nothing going for me except coming to work. That was it. And so, you know, pretty much at that time, it's like, I've got to remedy this and whatever way I can do it. And I figured, well, you know, the only way I'm going to be able to get my way out of this is to make it look like I've done something really heroic. And so I'm like, I'm going to try to figure out a way. I've got this problem. My family has a problem. My job has a problem. It's me. I need to remove myself. Yeah, I'm going to take myself out of this situation. It's beyond my control. The only thing I control is whether I'm alive or dead. And so I told myself, you know, I'm probably better off dead. And if I can do it just right, then the department puts on a great funeral, and I can hopefully at least leave something for my family, you know.
What is your family seeing or thinking at this time with you?
I honestly, I don't really remember, because I didn't really communicate with my wife. I mean, all I knew.
I mean, these days you're not going into work, you know. I mean, they're just letting you, hey, Dad's going through a hard time. Let's let him be. And
yeah, and they basically were so used to me being completely unattached to anything they had going on that I was just like a non-factor. I mean, I didn't even factor into their life. It was just, oh, you know, Dad's home and he's sitting on the couch and he fell asleep at 7:30 in the afternoon. You know, I mean, my wife was beyond pissed at me all the time. My kids, I mean, you know, they love their dad, and God bless them, but I mean, I had nothing to do with them. I was completely void of any kind of interaction with them at all. It was bad. They just didn't have a dad.
And you wanted to be just taken out of the picture, but you didn't know how to do it. You wanted to do it in a way that, I was reading that you would hope that you would miss a gun on a search, and then you would be taken out in a line of duty.
That's how crazy that I'd gotten. And I hate to use that word, but that was how out of my mind I felt. I mean, I told myself, convinced myself, not told, convinced, that if I could convince another person to kill me at work. Listen, when I think about how this sounds, when I say it out loud, it sounds insane. But if I could get someone to do that, or I could be in some terrible car accident or whatever, then I'm going to be a hero. I'm gonna get my picture up at the academy,
portrait,
and I'm gonna have the big funeral. And he was on his way to a call, and he was some kind of brave man. He was one of the best, and he was great at what he did, and he just servant's heart and all this stuff they say at these funerals. And I wanted to have some kind of a legacy for my wife, she'd get some money from the state. The department, would pay out for whatever for help, for a line of duty death. And maybe she'd be able to find somebody who was nice to her and she could start a new life. And I don't know, that money could buy the guy a new pickup or something. I don't know what they were going to do with that. I had no idea. But my only hope was that he was nice to my kids. That was pretty much the bottom line, was like, look, I'm useless. I'm out of my mind at this point. And if this guy that my wife maybe can meet, and I can have this legacy where, no one will know. I mean, that was the idea, was that I would have been successful in this like pantomiming of life. Like I felt like a puppet, like just what do they call, like a marionette, like the strings, and I'm just doing everything I can do to just go through the motions. And if I can leave with some kind of honor, then that will mean that my facade was complete. Like the trick that I tried to play on everybody, it was completely successful because no one knew, and they would never know. And I wouldn't have to worry about it, and my wife would be cured of her me problem, and everything would go back to normal. And, hopefully, I don't know, maybe I could check in on them from time to time. I don't know how that works, but I didn't, because I was so sick that I couldn't stay alive, because I didn't want to wait to die, because I felt like I was condemned anyway because I had killed this guy. And that's what it boiled down to, was my limited lack of knowledge of faith, and the way that, like, as a Christian person, I'm not trying to, tell my story without adding this. I'm not trying to,
but do it.
Not from the pulpit or anything like that.
Part of it.
But I didn't know enough about the way that my life as a Christian person, growing up, we didn't have a big time background, but I knew that there was like the 10 Commandments, right? I knew that was something. And I knew that one of those commandments was thou shalt not kill. And I didn't remember there being any kind of way out of that. Like, it's not like, well, it's okay if this happens, then you can do the killing part. That's fine. We'll figure out a way to work around it. Like, cops have been writing themselves out of trouble for, 150 years in this department. I can write my way out of this. It doesn't work that way with God. And so I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, I'm screwed. I'm just going to wait to die and then go to hell because I'm condemned because I killed this dude, even though he was trying to kill me. And I never got to that point. It was always just the initial act, and that's what I felt like. I'm never going to see my people again. And hopefully, if my wife can be with somebody else and I can not be here, then at least I won't have to wait and suffer alone, because eventually my wife was going to leave. There was no way she's going to continue to keep hanging on with me being a non-factor in her life. And I was going to be alone anyway. So just take myself out of this. And so I thought I could convince someone to kill me at work. And then I realized that that was never going to happen. Like, I was able to think through all of the mental illness and all of the darkness and all the pain and all the confusion that I had. They're like, you're never going to make that happen. You would never want to wish that on someone. That's terrible. Like, I don't, there are people I don't like. I would never wish that level of stress on a person. I mean, what are they going to do? Like, all of a sudden they like broke into a house and now they're going to have a capital murder charge? That no one's going to do. That's ridiculous. That's just not going to happen ever. So I tell myself, don't be such a wimp about it. Just take yourself and move on and do your own dying. Don't try to put it on someone else. This is your decision. It's your responsibility. You got yourself into this mess. Now you're going to get yourself out of it the only way you think is a viable option. And so at that point, I told myself, okay, I can figure this out. I'm a smart guy, and I've got a motorcycle. That's easy. Just forget the helmet one day, or, aim toward a bridge abutment or something like that, add some high speed, and, that's a good plan, right? I mean, it's not, I would never feel a thing. I bet you can get going fast enough. Maybe the helmet flies off right before you're about to hit, and everything, it's going to be a done deal, But then I'm kind of a big wimp when it comes to that. And that's what made me feel even worse, was that the planning and then the failing to act was driving me more crazy than the thought of suicide. Like, okay, this bridge coming up, I'm going to do it. And I would blow past it. And then I'd feel worse. And then I'm going to do it on this tomorrow morning when I go to work. That's when I'm going to do it. Because, because it's the day before payday, or it's the day that ends in Y, whatever. This is going to be the day. And then I wouldn't. oh, then okay, then you know what? Then the 18-wheeler in front of me, I'm just gonna not stop, and then I would stop, and that was even worse. That pushed me even further into this hole where I can't even friggin' kill myself. How pathetic and how powerless am I that I can't even talk myself into not being alive? Like it's a 50-50. Today is going to be the day or it's not. And I would think it was the day, and then it wasn't the day, and it was driving me crazy.
You were back to the 43,000-pound trigger.
Yeah.
And you're not performing.
And I need there's just so much heaviness in all this so far. But let me pull back something a little bit, and all these layers you're dumping on. I want to get back to something you said, but so you believe all this, at the epicenter of it is this guilt with shooting and killing that subject.
Yeah.
In the officer shooting. Yeah.
That was the moment where anything terrible that I had done in my life could have been excused, because it wasn't that big of a deal. But this was huge. And it was like I said, I was very ignorant about the way that the Bible is even written, having to deal with, blessed are the peacemakers and all these things that benefit,
that are redeeming,
right? Yeah. That my King, who's Jesus, my Redeemer, lives, and he's going to take care of me. I know that now. But at the time, I was abandoned at that point. That's what I felt like. There's if because you've sinned so incredibly, there's no amount of forgiveness for that. I know that there is. It's not a question now. But at the time, in that level of depression and the things that I wasn't able to cope with that because I didn't have the tools at my disposal, I felt like that was the moment in my life that made it go from, okay, you may have to do some butt kissing when you get there, but you'll probably get in. Now there's no chance. And I don't want to wait to die and go to hell. So I'm going to not be alive. And, because I'm never going to see my family. They're going to be in heaven because they're awesome. And I'm not going to be with them. And I'm not here them now. I'm not here on earth. I'm not with them because I can't even talk to my wife. I can't talk to my kids. I'm, like I said earlier, I'm a ghost that just floats through this house and mows the yard and brings home a paycheck. That was like the only thing I had to, hang my hat on. And it was, it was terrible. I'm like, I don't want to be living my whole life waiting. I'm like dead man walking or whatever. That's what I felt like. It was like I'm just this condemned person, and I hadn't even really felt like I did anything wrong, but I knew God knew that I had, and I was, and even though, his son Jesus, who walks on this earth as a person, to me, took all the sin of the world, but not mine. Like it was way beyond any power that he had to absolve me and forgive me for that sin so I could be with him, and my family and everybody else. I was never going to make it. And it was soul crushing because that's what I thought that's what I thought was my reward. And now it's been taken away. And I didn't even want it to be. I wanted to go get a burrito. I wanted just to go take this guy and go eat and go home. That was my goal. And it didn't work out that way. So, yeah.
What time frame here from whenever you first had the ideas of just wanting to escape the pain, remove yourself from society, from hoping that it would happen at work, and then you started, well, this isn't going to happen. Well, I can do this. I can have a traffic accident.
Right.
People die every day in car wrecks and motorcycle wrecks. Mm-hmm. At what point did you decide, okay, I am now going to formulate a plan? What is the time frame?
So the event happened in summertime, and then the following year we got all of the court stuff and all of the YouTube video releases and all the things that were not expected by me. They just things that happen through the natural process of going to trials, and not trials, but going to grand juries and all these things. Yeah. So, you have these ups and downs where you have to, wait out this decision by the grand jury, and you have to wait out this decision by the federal civil rights courts, and you have all these things. And it's like, it was a blur to me. I don't, but that was about a 10-month window. This is the following summer, right around my birthday, I guess was May of 2015. And that's what, that was the time frame that I told myself, I'm not going to do the car wreck thing. I'm not going to be able to convince someone to commit murder of a police officer. So, unfortunately, at the time, and like every day, cops carry around the source of possible self-destruction with us everywhere we go. And, that's when I told myself, well, I'm not gonna fail again to not be able to kill myself. And so I just planned to do what I was going to do a day at work, and my partner was off. He had taken the day off, or was a day off for him. And that was, was going to be the day that, that I died, because it was all this suffering and all this pain that I'd been going through. I was tired of hurting. I didn't want to hurt anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was hopeless anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was helpless anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was without my wife. I didn't want to feel like I was without my kids. They would be able to get over. It would just be like ripping a scab off. It might hurt, but it's going to be over, and we can move past it and regrow, and I won't have to worry about it. So, I just figured, okay, I'm not gonna fail anymore to be destructive. And so I had this big plan, and I had the squad car, and I was driving around, and I pulled in behind this little shopping center, and I parked the car and was a mess. I was all upset and, just crying and acting all crazy. And that, it's that just pathetic, hopeless crying that you're feeling like I've got nothing left. And so I'm going to scream at everybody and be mad at myself and mad at God and mad at all my family and mad at everybody in the whole situation. Nothing's getting resolved. And in the middle of all that, at some point, I remember thinking, well, okay, you know what? Let's suck it up. We're gonna kill ourselves today. This is gonna be it. Let's just do it. And so I had, for some reason, like I said, I had my raid jacket in the car with me. It was in my bag, and so I didn't want to make a big mess. So I wrapped my head around with the jacket to kind of keep everything in. And I didn't want another officer to find me like that and have to process that. So I thought, that I'll do that. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, now I feel stupid because I have this jacket around my head, and I got to write a note. Because that's what you do, I guess, from movies. I had no idea. So I thought, okay, well, what do you put in the note? I don't know, maybe you tell your wife you love her or whatever, I don't know. And okay, so let me write a note. Let me look for this big dramatic piece of paper and some, cool old English, calligraphy pens and stuff. And
pen with a feather.
Yeah, the feather pen, right, to make it look real nice, as if that would matter to anyone. But I didn't have that. I had a whip-out book. And so I wrote a suicide note on a whip-out book page that I ripped out with the little tears on the side, the little crap you have to cut off, in junior high to turn that paper in from your whip-out book or your 3-ring notebook or whatever. They were on there. I tore the paper out and had those little things hanging off the side. It was pathetic. It was probably the lowest point in my whole life. At that point, I felt like I'd reached the absolute bottom. That was the most pathetic thing I could imagine. Writing a suicide note on a page from my whip-out book. That was.
Do you remember what you wrote?
No, I don't think I really wrote anything. I think I tore the page out and I wrote my wife's name, and I wrote that I loved her, and I was sorry for a lot of things, and then I threw it on the bag. I didn't have any time for it anymore, and so then I had to go to the process of rewrapping my head, which that seemed awkward now. At the time, it was nothing I noticed, but now it seems real silly. And I'm still crying real hard, and I remember thinking, this is gonna suck. I hope this doesn't hurt. Maybe it will. Maybe not for very long. Whatever. It'll be quick. And I had my gun, and I remember my gun was on my lap. because I couldn't see. I had my jacket on my head, so I had no idea what's going on. I'm still crying about that. I'm thinking, okay, am I going to go underneath my chin? Am I going to go to the side of my head? Am I going to go through my mouth? How's this going to work? I want to make sure I'm not going to blow my face off and not die. That was the worst thing I could think of at that point, was not being successful, shooting yourself in the fucking head. Excuse me, I didn't, but it's like, how am I going to ever come back from that if I don't die? Now I'm going to be a quadriplegic that's going to be an even huger burden. And now I'm going to be paralyzed or worse. Not that that's a terrible thing, but for me it seemed horrible that I would not be able to do another attempt because I wasn't going to be able to move. These are the things that were going through my head. I've never in my life before or after felt like I was so out of control. There was so many demeaning, pathetic things that my life was now just in this pile of gravel around my life. There was just like stuff it was just garbage on the ground. And there's my life and among all this rubble and crap. And that's all I've got left is this idea that, well, I hope I don't mess up again. I hope I'm not a failure again. And so, okay, it's like, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go underneath my chin. Nope, no, I'm going to do the mouth thing. That seems like that's going to be a good thing to do. So I kind of wiggle the gun underneath my jacket, and I got my gun in my mouth, and now I really can't cry anymore because I got a gun in my mouth. And at that moment, I've got this unbelievably irritating, like skin, like itchy, scratching feeling underneath my whole skin, like my skin's like vibrating. And I remember thinking that felt really weird. And I guess looking back on it was probably adrenaline, I think, or something, a hormone or some kind of internal deal. And just like real, it was like almost painful, but not, And I thought, okay, this is it. This is going to be it, because I kind of remember thinking, I got, this is what's wrong with me, and I did one more thing, and this is it. I'm good, and then I was okay, because I've got all this noise. There's all this static, all this confusion. Like my ears are filled with this just screeching, distortion sound that's in my head. It sounds as real to me that day as the sound in my ears from these headphones. It's like that detailed. And then all of a sudden there's nothing. No sound at all. Completely quiet, which caught me off guard. Absolutely stunned me into what is going on. And then, I hear my wife. I hear her voice in my ear, just as plain as we're talking today. And, she says to me, John, she says, John, put the gun down. This is not the plan I have for you. And I remember thinking, how did my wife get into the squad car without me freaking knowing it? I had my head wrapped up and someone got into the car behind my seat without me knowing it. And now they're talking to me like we're talking right now. And it was the most shocking thing. I was so confused in that moment. I had to rip this jacket off my head to turn around. My wife wasn't in the car with me, right? She doesn't call me John. My wife is, God bless her, has never called me by my first name. It's always something very creative and beautiful and loving, obviously. But, I get this feeling that someone in the middle of all this misery snuck up on me. And that's pretty scary, And there was no one there. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? This is, okay. First of all, dude, put the gun back in your friggin' holster. Dude, we don't want anybody to know that we were back here, man. We got to figure something out. Put the gun up, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, what just happened, and how am I not dead? And why do I not feel bad about it? I feel great. I feel really good. I've got, all of a sudden, the clock reset, and I was a dead man, and now I'm alive. And I felt like that everything was okay. It was going to be okay. I didn't have an idea of what I was going to do in the next 5 minutes, but I knew I was still alive. And I don't know how that happened. To me, I think that, some power, I'm sure somebody could probably explain it away as some kind of, electrical imbalance or a chemical thing in my body, but I don't know about that. I choose to think that I was protected by the power that governs my life and that governs the universe. And Jesus, or my creator, used my wife's voice, because I always listen when Mama says something. You got to pay attention to that, right? So I had to be able to answer up for that, and that was the voice that could be used at that time. That's what I needed to hear to bring me back from this freaking terrible abyss that I had gotten myself uncontrollably dragged up toward, and standing there teetering over the side of this impossible deep place that I was going to try to go to without even thinking about it. And now I can turn around and walk away from that and see this shining sunlight and this warmth on my face that was a May day in Texas. I'm in my squad car. It's like, dude, you got to put this situation back together. Get this freaking jacket off your head and get rid of all this terrible evidence and hope nobody recorded it on a security camera. And, I went back to work. Just went back to answering calls after all that.
It was like you finally did make it to that door, when you were surrounded by darkness.
Yeah.
You got out.
That was exactly
energized.
what it felt like. Yeah, I mean, it was being reborn. That day, I felt like I've got a new lease on life. And people say that, but that was the only thing I could think was that, okay, you know what it's like to be at this suffering, this point that you're powerless, but because of the power of the creator of the universe, took the time out of his day to be like, hey man, you need to,
it ain't your time.
It's not your time, bud. I need you to you got other things ahead of you. Go do those things. Even if that's answering a 12B, go do that right now. And then we'll talk about everything else later. Just go handle that. And don't forget that, when you get home, your wife loves you and your kids are there and I love you and I love my friends and my people and it's going to be okay. And with that, then I was able to box this up and put it where cops put stuff all the time where we don't talk about it. But I was in a better place. And then I eventually, like we talked about before earlier in this conversation, I revisited it because it hit my heart. And I wanted to try to be able to share this in hopes it could help somebody else. And now I'm thriving professionally. I've got a counselor that was provided to me through the VA, and she's a wonderful woman. I owe her my life, through like an EMDR treatment called ART, it's Advanced Resolution Therapy. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I had her, she volunteered that, and I went through that process. She's wonderful, and my wife, and I'm in a church. Gotten reconnected to a church family, and I love my life. I mean, you never can 100% escape these feelings. They're part of who I am. But now with the tools that I have been given, not being addicted to alcohol, not having these stressors that I can't cope with, if they are something terrible that comes up, I know there's outreach. There are people who are supportive of me. I'm supportive of the folks that I work with, and trying to offer this testimonial helps me. My counselor believes that it's therapeutic for me to tell this event, and in addition to helping myself, that it might help someone. So,
well, I will say that I thank you for this, because there's so many people that are struggling with the same life, and they're planning to remove themselves from the pain just like you were. And when you're describing that sensation in your body of vibrating, the itching, it reminded me that your body was fighting back also, like it knew that it was the ultimate threat.
Yeah.
And you were fighting back internally, and then divine intervention.
I believe, yeah. I think I agree with that, because I've thought about it, I've read about it, done a little bit of research, and people don't give their brain enough credit for self-sustaining, and I absolutely believe that sensation probably was kind of a life-saving measure. Almost like when you are drowning, your body will pull blood and oxygen from your limbs into your heart and your core, organs, vital organs, your brain, to protect your life. People go underwater and they're in freezing water for 45 minutes and they somehow manage to live. It's all, some kind of a thing. And I think that vibration was probably, circulation being cut off and all these weird things that your body does, without you having to think about it.
To
thank
survive.
God. Yeah, just so you don't have something terrible happen. If it does, you'll be prepared for it. It's best of its ability, I guess.
Joe talked about others out there like you, maybe going through similar life circumstances, and they may not be as blessed as you to hear that voice that said, put the gun down. So I want to say thank you for coming on here to say this, because maybe this interview is a chance for them to hear that voice through you.
I hope it is.
Yeah.
I hope that it is, because I'm very blessed to have been the recipient of that gift, and if I can tell anyone, one person, then that's a win for me, and that would make that would help to kind of complete, in my mind, all the the therapy I've been going through, and and trying to get to a point where I feel like I'm benefiting others. Then that's what I want, and I appreciate y'all letting me come on and spend time with y'all today.
I want you to put yourself on the outside. You're outside that squad car that night. What would you tell a person that you clearly are watching fall apart? They're wrapping their head in a raid jacket. They have a plan. What would you tell someone right now, if you were on the outside looking at them? What would you tell them to keep them alive?
To stop what you're doing, to get help, to talk to me, to talk to someone that you care about. This is not the last day of your life. This is a day that I want you, as an observer of that kind of misery, and I tell people this at work, I understand that you don't want to be alive, but I want you to live. I love you, and I want you to not be a dead person, because your life is yours, and it will not be the same without you. You are vital to everybody that you come in contact with. Even if you think that no one cares, if you've got no one to talk to, that's your thought, that's the way you feel, I'm talking to this person right now. That person's life is now in my hands. I can only do as much as you're going to be here with me until we get you the help that you need. I'm not going to leave and walk away I'm not going to abandon you in this situation. If that's my feeling, you can't abandon yourself either. We're in this together. The minute you get out of this car and unwrap your head and put the gun down, we're going to go and talk to somebody who can help you, because your life is of the utmost importance. It is a beautiful, perfect thing, and you don't have to be a Christian person. You can believe in the Earth Mother or some kind of magic fruit that flies around and grants people wishes. I don't care. Whatever you find that is your focal point, that energy that you pull strength from, wrap your hands around it, hold on to my hand. We're going to walk together to get you the help you need, and the magic fruit will take care of you, or whatever you have to have that's going to make you a whole person again. Nothing that you've gone through is so terrible that you are not within the scope of love for the creator of your universe and the people who love you. Whether they may not be here right now, you may think they've walked away from you, you may feel that you've walked away from them, you can walk right back. It's not the end of the world today. We're going to be fine, we're going to get through this, and you're going to be able to be someone who's successful in that day. I can't give you tomorrow, but I'm going to give you right now, for sure. It's just, that's my promise to that person. It's my guarantee.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.